Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. In fact, right now we are conducting a search for a 3 to 7 year insurance defense associate for a prominent civil trial firm in Austin. So if you or someone you know might be interested, please let us know. You can reach out Daniel at varsitysearch.com. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. A few notes before we get into this episode. We are currently working on our next movie verdicts episodes right now, and I'm excited to get those out to you quickly. And with the challenging climate that we all find ourselves in, we thought a little laughter and levity is what would be best. So be on the lookout in the coming weeks for Liar Liar and Legally Blonde. We are working on both of those right now, and we'll likely have some special guests as part of that as well. Okay, today's guest is, speaking of guests, today's guest is at the top of her field in the practice of appellate law. Amanda Taylor is a board-certified appellate lawyer with the Austin office of Butler Snow, and among her many accomplishments is serving as lead counsel for over 70 matters before the Texas Supreme Court and Texas Intermediate Courts. She's also appeared before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and has been a Texas super lawyer in appellate law for the past 6 years. Today we are going to, again, take some extra time at the top to talk about how the coronavirus is impacting the legal industry, Amanda's practice, and what young lawyers can do to adapt to this current reality, however long it might last. So I'm excited that you're with us today as we talk with Austin appellate lawyer Amanda Taylor on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Amanda Taylor joins us now. Amanda, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and we're both, looks like, recording from home, as we are all supposed to be doing right now, right? And
Indeed. Indeed, I am in my house.
Yeah. Let's start off by just kind of hearing a little bit about how this health emergency has been impacting you and your practice. Just kind of talking about within your firm, what's going on with the attorneys, the staff, kind of what's the workplace environment, and how are you guys working together and working through this?
Sure. So I'm very happy to say that at Butler Snow, we were well prepared for an emergency. We had the technology in place that we needed to pretty quickly transition to working at home. Awesome. That includes all of our staff and all of our lawyers. We have a few lawyers that, of course, have to get up into the office and get materials here and there, but we are all working at home, and we're trying to bring some fun in with Zoom happy hours on a weekly basis. Right. So we're still seeing each other's faces and checking in, and really with a law firm that's has offices all through the country, primarily in the Southeast. It's been remarkable to watch how quickly we all transition to home and how we continue to cross market work and cross sell work across our geographic regions from home. So
yeah, well, that's so fantastic. Okay. You guys were prepared and were able to execute that. Do you have any tips for us on how to make the most of Zoom happy hours? Because that seems to be a thing these days. Have you learned anything?
Well, sometimes the theme can be fun. You know, I think at our next one, we're going to be talking about our favorite Netflix episodes.
There you go.
So we're lawyers. We like to stay organized.
Right. Absolutely. Now, are you watching The Tiger King? Is that something that's happening in your firm? Is that a topic of conversation?
So I am actually not watching it. Okay. I think I might be the only one. But I have, in the current draft of a brief that I'm working on, worked in a slight reference to the Tiger King. So we'll see if that makes it to the final cut.
I think we are going to see a number of briefs and opinions even that might have some citations that are alluding just from this period where this is all we have.
Right.
What What about from your clients? What are you hearing from them? How is it impacting their businesses and their, just thoughts about their whatever legal matters they might have? What's going on with the clients?
Right. The biggest areas where we are getting questions are, as you might expect right now, labor and employment questions. What can employers do? What rights do employees have during this time? Restructuring questions. Businesses trying to figure out as their bottom lines look a little bit different, or what potential federal assistance they might be entitled to receive from the coronavirus. Those are big questions. And then regulatory and healthcare questions have been a big area for my law firm in the last month.
Yeah.
On the flip side, litigation is down a little bit right now.
Mm-hmm.
Our courts in Texas have done a great job of transitioning to electronic hearings and things like that. But filings, I don't know if you saw the numbers from the Texas lawyer by Angela Morris today, but she analyzed the number of civil filings in Texas over the last 3 years. And apparently by the end of March 2020, the numbers were down almost 50% from where they were in March of 2019. So we can't deny that civil filings are down.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see a surge of filings in Q3 and Q4. Yeah. So, I think this is a temporary thing, but it certainly has shifted some of our focus to being able to assist clients answering questions about emerging issues as the new regulations are coming down from the federal government on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you mentioned a little bit about what the courts are doing. Have you, just in interactions with either opposing counsel or just within the bar and the other attorneys in your legal community, has there been anything that you've noticed that you've been either encouraged by or that's concerning, things to watch out for right now?
Right. A lot of things I'm encouraged by, honestly. As an appellate lawyer, I am first watching the Texas Supreme Court and our intermediate courts of appeals, and then the trial courts for my personal practice. Yeah. But Blake Hawthorne at the Texas Supreme Court has just done a remarkable job of getting information out to all lawyers about what's happening in our courts across the state. The Texas Supreme Court has now issued 8 emergency orders to govern those things. I've seen courts not only across Texas, but across the country conducting oral arguments via Zoom and hearings via Zoom. All opposing counsel that I've had interactions with, we have all been on the same page in terms of cooperation and understanding that this is all, out of all of our control. And so we're working together on deadlines.
Yeah. That's great to hear. And great to hear that people are pulling together and all kind of, even if adversarial in terms of the case, on the same side in terms of this issue and trying to do what's best for everyone involved. Right. So, well, good. Well, as I think, the audience for the show is younger lawyers, and they're, of course, now coming into the profession maybe in their first or second year. And this is an initiation of sorts that none of us have had. So we're all kind of learning and figuring things out as we go in some ways. But I think what you said earlier was really important about just the level of preparation and where you guys were with your technology and abilities to adapt is a lesson that is always going to be applicable for folks just to be on the, looking ahead and not being stuck in where you've been.
Right. Well, whether it's a viral pandemic or a hurricane or whatever may happen, I do think it's important that we prepare for an emergency when we're not in a state of emergency and be ready to go when that happens.
Right. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, we, pandemic of this kind looks like maybe comes every 100 years. There may be another one, but the hurricanes happen in Texas, in Houston especially, every year, and maybe not knocking everyone out of their buildings every year, but as we talked with Brian Lopez last week or 2 weeks ago, it is something they have to be ready for all the time. And hurricanes are an annual thing, so not just a once in a century thing.
Right.
Well, let's transition a little bit and just kind of hear a little more about your practice. You mentioned you're an appellate lawyer. Tell us about that and kind of just in general what your firm does, but your specific practice within it.
Right. So my firm, like I said, we are across the nation. We have a very diverse group of practice areas, which has also proven to be helpful at a time like this, because when something like litigation goes down, it's nice to have other practice areas that are up. And so we do everything from labor and employment on both the transactional and consulting side to the litigation side, a lot of pharmaceutical litigation, drug and device litigation, products liability, restructuring, bankruptcy, public bond and finance, litigation, appellate. I'm not naming all of our practice areas, but you get the idea.
Yeah, right. You have a
It's
few
pretty
lawyers.
diversified.
Yeah,
Right.
a few hundred lawyers. Yeah.
Yes, we do. So within that, I am an appellate lawyer. I'm board certified in Texas civil appeals. But what that means, I think a lot of young lawyers have an idea that that means you're only at the Court of Appeals level, that you're only writing a brief and going and arguing to a panel of judges. But truthfully, my practice has me in the trial courts quite a bit. I like to describe myself as the law lawyer. So a trial lawyer or a litigator might focus a lot of their attention on developing the facts and the evidentiary record, but I'm there to make sure that the legal questions and strategy are shaped from the beginning of a case.
Right.
I always say, if you win a verdict or get a final judgment in your favor, but the Texas Supreme Court ultimately reverses it, then you didn't really win.
Yeah, right.
So I like to shape that strategy from the beginning, whether it's a procedural question or a jurisdictional question, anything that is a legal issue instead of a factual issue. That's where I kind of jump in and handle a lot of dispositive motions, pleas to the jurisdiction, a lot of interlocutory appeals, motions practice, in addition to appeals from final judgments.
Yeah. How did you get into that initially? How was that something did you fall into that, or did you know from day one of law school that's what you wanted to do? How did it come about?
Right. Well, it's an interesting story that might help some of the younger lawyers who are afraid right now because of the change in circumstances they were not predicting. I went to Baylor Law School with the full intention of being a plaintiff's trial lawyer. That is what I was going to do. And I had no doubt about that. And then when I was in law school, the legislature passed what was called House Bill 4, and that was the major tort reform bill that swept changes across the state of Texas and turned plaintiff's practice on its head at that time. So I had a job offer from a plaintiff's law firm, and they called me one day and said that they were going to have to defer it because they didn't know what was going to happen after this legislation. And so I thought that I was set with a job and ready to go. And then I wasn't, just one day to the next. But the good news is that I had been on a moot court team and made it to the final rounds and gone and argued in front of the Third Court of Appeals in Austin. And one of the justices on that court expressed an interest to my moot court professor, Ron Beal, that she was interested to hire me as a law clerk. And so I became a law clerk at the Court of Appeals instead of going to take my first job as a young associate at a plaintiff's firm. And I found out then that I absolutely loved appellate work. I ended up staying at the Court of Appeals for almost 3 years and worked for Justice Jan Patterson and then Chief Justice Ken Law, and then went into private practice after that. And I was able to start handling appeals really right from the beginning of my practice and just ran with it from there. I feel like I got very lucky, but the lesson for the young lawyer is, even if you think you have a plan and something changes, it's not within your control, it will still turn out okay if you have passion for what you're doing.
And that's a great word, because, you came out at that very kind of monumental time in Texas law practice. When I was coming out, it was the recession of 08 and 09, and people were losing their jobs. Then the job offers, like you were saying, were either getting deferred or totally withdrawn. And now I imagine we're going to see some of that, who knows how much or in what sectors or whatever, but we'll see some of that probably here as well. And so, I mean, it's something that you still have to move forward. You still have to adapt and figure, but there's hope there, like you're saying, to find the right place for you. Well, is there anything going on in appellate law? I mean, kind of virus aside, is there anything going on in appellate law, just either in what's going on in Texas at the legislative level or from the courts, that you're particularly interested in or paying attention to?
Really what I'm paying attention to right now is not as a change in Texas, but it is a change in surrounding jurisdictions that I think are following the lead set by the appellate bar in Texas.
Okay.
About 15 or 20 years ago, I would say a shift started in Texas for the appellate bar to really become a more sophisticated standalone practice, a transition of our trial lawyers and litigators understanding the true value add of having an appellate lawyer on the team, as opposed to the mindset of it's my case, I'm going to handle it soup to nuts from day one all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, Texas lawyers recognize, I believe, especially in a complex civil case, that you need to bring appellate counsel on early and consult with them and let them do their job. So what I think is really interesting right now is we're starting to see that in other states too. I specifically am looking at Tennessee and Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, the states obviously where my law firm has a presence, but with the advent of appellate Twitter a few years ago, which is really comes out of Texas, so many people are now following appellate Twitter and getting on board with this idea of appellate lawyers as a value add, not just a service partner, which I think is an exciting development and something I'm happy to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is exciting and gives, I think, more credence to people that want to get into appellate law, that it is becoming more of a specialized and appreciated and valued practice area on its own, separate and apart. I want to ask you a little bit about young associates and how they can, early in their careers, make a positive impression on the partners at the firm and set their career on a good course. So,
right. To me, I think the biggest thing is understanding that this is a profession. It is not just an industry. It is not just a job. And that shapes every decision that a young lawyer makes on a daily basis, in my opinion. It makes a difference in how a young lawyer shows up at the office. Is this somebody who's coming in that has a positive attitude, that is inquisitive, asking how she or he can be of help on a case? Or is this somebody who is sitting in their office, kind of waiting for somebody to hand them a project and being more concerned with what their bonus may or may not be at the end of the year? So, recognizing it truly is a profession. We have this wonderful opportunity to serve clients. That's our main goal. It's not to make money. It is to serve clients. And just that shift in mindset between one type of young lawyer and another makes a huge difference in the work that they ultimately produce, I think, and also just how happy they are being lawyers. If you're focused on the bigger picture and the great opportunity that we have in this profession, you're going to be happier doing your job. And it's a cyclical thing.
I want to follow up on something you said specifically with regards to kind of the sitting in your office and waiting for work to be assigned, versus, I guess the opposite would be actively in offices of partners asking for work and asking how you can help. That's something that I've run across a number of times with young lawyers and back at the law school with law students who just didn't really have a grasp of really what that was. And in fact, sometimes lawyers who just lost jobs because their work product was good, but they just never were aggressive about going to get work from people. And so they didn't know who they were. And when it came cut time or something like that, they didn't make it. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't think everyone really and I don't think it's from a work ethic standpoint even. I think it's just a mindset of, I'm supposed to go ask for work versus, well, I'm the young lawyer, they'll assign it to me when it's time or something like that. And I don't think it's malicious or bad work ethic. I just don't understand how it works. So talk about that a little bit.
Right. Well, as an appellate lawyer, I'm a detail person and I like things that are specific. So I want to give really two answers to your question of very specific things that young lawyers can do instead of just a general, be motivated. But the first one is follow along with the cases that are happening in your law firm. What cases do partners have, or even senior associates? Follow what is happening in that case start to just read, and this isn't necessarily billable, but read some of the key pleadings or motions and do a little independent research, or try to become a thought leader on a topic that you see boiling up in a case. Maybe it's an issue of, is this oral agreement enforceable? And so if you do some studying up on that, and then you swing by the partner's office and you say, hey, I know in that Jones versus Brown case, you have this issue, and I've actually looked into that, and I've got some thoughts, or I think I could be of help. That's going to catch their ear and be much more likely for the partner or the senior associate to say, oh, you know what, Amanda could be of help on this, and she seems really interested in it, instead of just going by and saying, hey, I'm free right now. If there's any kind of project, then I'm here. That's not necessarily bad.
Right.
It's always good to let people know you're willing to help. But if you really demonstrate an interest in what's going on.
Yeah.
So that's the first point.
Yeah.
The second one is related, but it's more external to the firm. So regardless of what's happening in the firm, again, it's the idea of being a thought leader. What legal issues are out there in the community? What is being briefed in some of the higher courts? If a young lawyer can find something that they're interested in, that's a nuance in the law, and start writing about it, researching, writing, doing blog posts. Blog posts don't have to be a whole paper. It could be 500 words.
Yeah, right.
But do something to start identifying yourself as a thought leader. That is naturally going to produce work, not only from outside your firm, but from people within your firm that see you're doing these things, and they're going to want to bring you onto their teams. So I think, both internally and externally, it's mostly just putting in that extra effort.
Right. Well, and what may be obvious, but just tossing it out there to people listening, force majeure clauses in contracts, probably a hot topic that
right.
people are trying to figure out what's going to be enforceable, what's not, how we rewrite these things going forward to cover pandemics or not. I don't know.
That's a great example.
Probably a paper that someone wrote 4 years ago is going to start being found on the internet right now.
Right.
About that. Well, good. Well, and then as you're going through the process, and we've had these conversations before about hiring lawyers, and as you're going through that process, looking for talent and looking for the right people to bring in, what are a couple of the key things that you're really looking for? Obviously, there's a credential element, and whatever that might be for your firm, that's fine. But I mean, in terms of just, once they meet whatever thresholds you have, to determine whether they're the right person or the right fit for you all, what are some of the things you're looking at?
Right. Well, I do look at a lot of resumes.
Yeah.
And, you start to see patterns and things. But one thing that I always look for is something that sets that student apart in terms of experience or maturity outside of just being a good student. So and look, I'm somebody that went straight through school. I mean, I always had jobs while I was in school, but I didn't take time off between college or law school. So I'm not saying it's that you have to take time off and go do something else, but I do want to see some outside experience, something that is going to help you relate to the issues our clients are actually facing. And if you can get that on your resume in a way, even if you were just a receptionist in an office, but that somehow exposed you to an industry or a business model that could add value in the legal setting, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes students don't realize, having spoken to students and found out interesting things about them that weren't on their resume.
Right.
And I say, why wasn't that on your resume? I realized that they might not think it's of any value. They think, well, it was just a small job, or it wasn't in the legal industry. And I think that's a mistake to leave those types of experiences off. Not only does it give you something memorable or something to talk about during an interview, but it helps you jump off the page. Other than that, another thing that's really important to me and to my law firm are issues of diversity and inclusion.
Sure.
And so somebody might say, well, I am a white male. What am I supposed to do about that?
Right.
And to me, it's not only finding candidates that come from historically underrepresented backgrounds, it's also candidates who've demonstrated that this is something important to our society and important to them. And so maybe they serve on a committee at the law school that addresses these issues, or they've written a paper on a topic like this. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can demonstrate that you have the core values that my firm wants to promote and enhance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I appreciate you going there. The interview itself, what have you seen in interviews that work or don't work? I'm sure you have some stories, but what are a couple things that candidates should be mindful of as they're going through an interview process?
Right. Obviously, a conversant person, somebody who's easy to chat with, is, I'd say, the most important part of an interview. That is coupled with a lack of ego. It's okay to say if you don't know something. This isn't like a substantive test. But, demonstrating that you are the type of person that we would want to work shoulder to shoulder with on a daily basis, or virtual shoulder to virtual shoulder.
Right.
But, just ease of conversation is really, really important. I think demonstrating, as we talked about before, a passion for the profession of practicing law, as opposed to a passion for making money. That can come through in different questions that people ask, and of course, different ways that they answer questions. But those would be the two biggest things, I think, in an interview. And of course, showing up, looking the part.
Yeah.
I don't see that overlooked very often, but on occasion I have, and it's almost sad. Like, I wish I could just tell the candidate, here's one or two tips on how to show up at an interview.
Yeah.
I think law schools pretty much do that, but sometimes people could just get a second opinion, maybe.
Yeah. And I think too, we're going to see an interesting time with some period here of video interviews, Zoom and other interviews, and what that looks like. I mean, I don't know, for you, my advice would still be to dress professionally, like you're going to an interview in person and all of that. But
absolutely.
But thinking about the surroundings behind you, I think, can also contribute to the professionalism of the presentation. And so, some people can try to do the background thing or whatever behind them, which I don't know if that technology is quite all the way there if you don't have a professional like green screen thing. And so just all those types of things, I think, do start to play in as you're maybe doing more interviews online and by video moving forward.
I would definitely suggest that. I've actually had some experience with that even before the coronavirus, just because, people are interviewing from all over the country. And my suggestion would be, once we are not in, like mandated quarantine, if you're going to do a video interview and you can get to somewhere like a private room in a library, or a private room in an office, if there's, an office space that you could use, take advantage of that. I have seen, I will leave the details confidential, but I have seen things go awry when interviewing from one's apartment, even with the best of intentions.
Absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. And I'm still, every time I hear that kind of a story, I think about the guy that was on CNN on that remote interview, and the kid rolling in there, and the wife coming in and grabbing the kid out.
Right.
It was so sweet and funny and all that, but at the same time, you wouldn't want it happening in a job interview, probably.
Right. Well, and I'll say what happens. I think the people conducting the interview are human, and they can be very forgiving.
Yeah.
Recognizing. But the problem is the candidate gets so thrown off.
Yes.
That it really impacts their ability to continue the interview with their best foot forward. So
yeah, no, I think that's well said. Well, is there anything that, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our time, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would want to share, or that you think young lawyers need to know?
It's not limited to young lawyers, but one thing that I just keep thinking about during this pandemic is issues about access to justice, and how important it's going to be for people to commit to some pro bono work as we move forward through these issues. And for young lawyers, I think that does create a great opportunity. There are opportunities all over the place, but that's, I think, a big thing on my mind right now as we face the COVID-19.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely a great thought, and like you said, I do think a great opportunity for lawyers to plug in, to give back, but also to develop a new area, an area of specialty, or that kind of thing. So there was one other thing I did want you to comment on, actually, before we move on or wind up our time, and that is, we talked about diversity earlier. I know that women in the law, especially in the private practice and law firm side of things, have a different journey and struggle in a number of different ways. And so, if there are things related to how to raise a family as a female in a law firm environment and maintain a successful law practice as you've done, what are a couple of pieces of advice or encouragement that you might give to especially the young women lawyers that we have listening?
Sure. I think the first thing is to know what you actually want.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself about what you want from your practice. And it does not have to be the same thing for all women or all lawyers. So if you identify, and it also doesn't have to be the same for every phase of life.
Yeah.
But, maybe be specific about a 1, 3, 5, and 10-year plan and what it is that you want to get out of those phases.
Yeah.
If you are at the phase of your life where you want to skyrocket in the firm as much as you can, you want to be hitting high billable hours and you want to be attaining big victories in court, maybe that's the time in your life when you are not as much on a family work balance, but you're just putting it all into work. There's very possibly going to be a different time in life, whether it's that you're caring for aging parents or young children, that you shift that and you say, you know what I want to do right now is high quality client work, but on a reduced hour schedule, but you're still performing at a high level and doing great work. And that's good too. I mean, it just really depends on what you're trying to get out of it. And I think that's equally true for men and women.
Sure.
For women, it's also incredibly important to have a mentor who is not just there to give you advice, but also to be a sponsor and be a cheerleader. Somebody in the room when decisions are getting made that can advocate for you, to explain, if not everybody in the room already understands, that maybe what Susie is doing while raising 2 kids should be viewed through a different lens as somebody who doesn't have that outside time constraint, and just somebody to really advocate for what you actually are contributing to the firm, which isn't necessarily encapsulated in billable hours only. There's a lot more that people give back to their law firms than a billable hour.
Right. Absolutely. Well, thanks for that. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I've got some rapid fire questions to close our time. And so if you're ready for these quick hitters, we'll roll through these.
Hit me.
All right. So name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Dedication.
What habit has been key to your success?
Organization.
Your favorite app or productivity tool?
I'm going to date myself, but it is truly a legal pad. I have stacks and stacks of legal pads with lists and notes, and I couldn't function without a legal pad.
That is awesome. Here's a new question we added last week. Your favorite social distancing activity?
It's good for you because it is doing long walks with podcasts.
Oh, perfect. There you go.
Yeah.
So
I do that now instead of commuting.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So I was reading an article about just podcast listenership over the last few weeks, and it's, I think, down, generally speaking, and I think mostly because commutes are not happening. And so a lot of people do listen to them on their commutes. So it's good to know that there's on your side of things, and maybe others like you that are substituting now their commute with Walks with podcasts. So that's exciting. I'm glad to hear it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, really, like I've found a few that I love, and it's just a great way to get some fresh air and
Absolutely.
learn something.
Well, good. And then the last one is favorite legal movie.
Oh, Legally Blonde. No question.
That's awesome.
No question about that. Not the second one, only the first one.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely. Yeah. The first one's great. And we're going to be doing that one on the show, our deep dive into legal movies. Legally Blonde is on the list. It's coming. My wife's wanting to jump in on that one. So that's going to be a whole new thing. But good. Well, Amanda, thank you again so much for taking time to visit with us. Really appreciate it, and have enjoyed working with you and getting to know you all these years, and just great to have you on the show today.
Same to you, and thanks for doing this great podcast. I think it's a really great idea.
All right, my thanks again to Amanda Taylor for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do a couple of things? Would you, number one, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and they're all right there for you in your feed. We do these shows every Monday, and then we sprinkle in our movie verdicts episodes as well into the same feed, so you can get both of those. And then secondly, would you share this episode with your friends and colleagues in the Texas legal community so that we can serve as many of you as possible? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show or how I might be able to help you in any way, please don't hesitate to email directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. And also, as a reminder, if you or someone you know would be interested in a 3 to 7 year insurance defense associate position with a prominent Austin civil trial firm, please have them reach out. Again, daniel@varsitysearch.com. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thank you again so much for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.